Great. Well, we'll get started here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Margarett Waterbury. I'm the editor-in-chief of Distiller magazine at ADI. And I'm so excited to be here with Christian Drouin today. Christian is the chairman of Calvados Drouin. He's also kind of self-described the missionary of Calvados. And we're going to be talking about Calvados and Christian's career and his new book today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. Questions are more than welcome. You can feel free to pop them in the chat if we're in the middle of our conversation, or you can just raise your hand and I'll try to keep an eye on those notifications and you can interrupt us. This can be a casual conversation. So I'll introduce Christian and then we'll kind of get started here. So Christian's father, Christian Drouin Sr., actually started Calvados Drouin in the 1960s in Gonville-sur-Honfleur. Hopefully my pronunciation is up to snuff there. But when he started, he didn't actually commercialize anything at first. He spent the first 15 years really just making brandy. And so in 1979, they were finally ready to start selling brandy. But Christian Drouin Sr. needed, he thought that maybe he needed a hand from his son, Christian Drouin II, to actually launch the business and start commercializing those products. So Christian Drouin here is Junior, Christian Drouin with us today, had been living in Canada and returned to France to help launch the brand in sales. And during that time, he was a tireless advocate, both obviously for Calvados Drouin, but also for Calvados as a category. In 2013, they were recognized as the European Spirits Producer of the Year at the London International Wine and Spirits Competition, which was a real moment of vindication for this family-owned company. Today, Christian's son, Guillaume, is now CEO of the company. Christian is chairman. And in addition to being kind of one of the most effective promoters of Calvados in the world, Christian Drouin is also an author. He's written several books in multiple languages, including most recently The Art of Calvados from White Mule Press, which just came out this fall and is available now. So Christian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much.
So your father started the company, Calvados Drouin, but you're the one who kind of spearheaded the commercialization of the brandies. And it sounds like from the beginning, you focused pretty extensively on exports. So why did you go that route and kind of what challenges and opportunities did that present?
Yeah, first of all, when I came back to Normandy and tried to sell our Calvados, I found it was extremely difficult to sell a single bottle to Norman restaurant, Norman stores. They all had their own suppliers. No time to give me. It was going down. I mean, the Norman people were drinking less Calvados and more whiskey. So it appeared to me quickly that it would be very difficult to build commercialization in Normandy. That at that time, Normandy was the main market, and some Calvados was sold outside of Normandy in France, but not much on export markets. Only 17% of the production was exported. So I quickly realized that I had no choice. If I wanted to build my company, not much. It would be very difficult to do it from Normandy. So for me, going in other countries was not a problem. For 10 years, I live abroad. I travel a lot, and being in one country or another is not a problem. I feel comfortable everywhere. But of course, it's not easy. It's not easy. First, it costs money to travel. Then, if you accept a neighbor's country like Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, Luxembourg, where Calvados was exported, nothing or so little was exported outside of those countries. So I say, and I realized that I should try to sell Calvados in countries that have never consumed Calvados. That was quite a challenge because no competition, but no consumers. But that was my challenge. So I knew I had a high quality product, and I realized that to be successful, I have to be a pioneer. I have to educate, I have to convince consumers that Calvados was an interesting product. They should try it. They should consume it. How to do that? Well, quality. My father was a very demanding man, and although he knew nothing about production, he hired the right people. So he has accumulated stock, very high quality product. And when I started to meet food and beverage managers, sommelier, bartender, they all agreed that the product was of an exceptional quality. But that's not enough, of course. how to how to convince uh, first importers. Importers, it's quite difficult to convince. You come with a product which is perfectly unknown, and so you expect them to do a lot of work, a lot of educational work, to sell small quantities of a new product. That was easier than today, because at that time, in importers, you found many passionate people, really interested into the product. So they were able to find somebody that loved your product and decided to spend time without making much money, maybe none. Today, it's much more difficult because finance is the key things. Companies are much bigger. There is not, and it's extremely difficult for wine or spirit lover to start a business like that. Um, what you need also is product that attract consumer. So if you come with a bottle of regular bottle of Calvados that looks like any spirit bottle, can be an opportunity. Um, I produce the first apple in the bottle, and an apple which is grown in the bottle and kept in Calvados, and that happened to be a very attractive product. I've all the women were so attracted by that bottle with an apple in the bottle. Oh, what is it? It's an apple? How did you get the apple in? That was situation. And then they were interested to taste, to try the product. So that was a Korea shipped to Taiwan, to mainland China, was that pomme prisonnière, apple in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that it was very important to create new product to attract the consumers. Then you need the help of prescribers, sommelier, bartenders, wine writers. So you have to meet them. You have to convince them that the product is really worth paying attention. And this is time more than anything else because those people are open-minded. If they think that they are ready to try the product, and if they like it, they are ready to push it, to mention it, to talk about the product. So I spend a lot of time on that. But at the end, you have to convince the consumer. And if you are a very small company, you know, that's quite difficult because you don't have the financial resources to do advertising and things like that. Um, to convince bartenders, to convince, well, that's easier. You can do master classes if you have the help of your importer. I've
Hmm.
conducted hundreds, maybe thousands of master classes in the world.
Hmm.
They are always interested and
So
they learn. Sorry.
that's an interesting, well, I was just thinking about that because Calvados is quite a traditional beverage in France.
Yeah.
But many of the sort of traditional methods of drinking it, right, like as an after dinner drink, or the Trou Normand, which is sort of the traditional like sip
Yeah.
of Calvados in the middle of a large meal, or a café calva, so serving Calvados with coffee. Those aren't necessarily drinking occasions or drinking formats that feel familiar to many modern people. I mean, most
Yeah.
of us aren't having multi-course dinners every night. So sort of as you were promoting Calvados internationally, how did you kind of balance that sense of tradition with also that need to appeal to modern drinkers or new ways of consuming spirits? I know you've done a lot of work with cocktail bartenders. So how did you balance that in those master classes that you were teaching?
That's very complex because the word is not unique. Every country has its own tradition. And it's true that our very traditional way of enjoying Calvados are disappearing a little bit or totally. If you True Normal, for instance, has almost totally disappeared because True Normal was dinner, with a lot of food. Um, for instance, banquet for 8 people, you might have 10, 11 main courses. You start at 1 p.m. and you end at 7 or something like that. No way you can go to the end without one, two, or three true normal. But that has almost disappeared. No, people are very careful. They don't eat that much, and they eat, which had almost totally disappeared, but it's coming back in new ways. Is Café Calva. Café Calva was a tradition in Norman farms. No much material. People were working with their arms and hands, a very physical job. So they started in the morning, finishing late in the afternoon. And they started in the morning with brunch and cafe, with morning, again, Café Calva, and lunch, and another break mid-afternoon, and the whole day they were drinking almost one bottle of Calvados associated to cafe. That has disappeared because now farms are very big. They're driving big machine. They don't drink. Um, but it's a funny thing. And in the last 2 or 3 years, some very high-end places in Paris, for instance, launch again Café Calva, but in a modernized way. It's places like the Ritz in Paris has conducted some Café Calva experiences, which are working well, but it's completely different from the traditional one in France, where Café was bad and Calvados was bad too. Um, well, Calvados is considered as digestive. It's still consumed, of course, as a digestive, but less than before now if you drive, you're controlled. You are not allowed to have alcohol in your blood or very little. Um, so business lunch have also more disappeared. So people enjoy and Calvados after dinner, especially if they stay ski or if they stay in the mid-down and things like that. So that's still the traditional way to consume Calvados, still alive. Um, Calvados is still used in cooking because it has a lot of flavor, a lot of aromas, and chefs like to cook with Calvados. So this is still alive. But there are new way of consuming Calvados. But as I say, it's complex. For instance, pairing Calvados and food is, let's say, it's new in France, but in many countries with spirit culture, pairing spirit with food is tradition. It's tradition in Russia with vodka. It's tradition in Scandinavia with aquavit. It's tradition in Korea. It's tradition in Japan with it's tradition in China with Baijiu, in Japan with Soshu, and so on. So the challenge there is to try to get their own national spirits replaced by Calvados for fun or something different. What relaunched Calvados recently is cocktail. Calvados-based cocktail is not something new. It was very popular between 1880 and 1930, 35. Thanks to American bartenders, because they were using cider brandy or apple brandy from the United States. And when they moved to Europe, when they moved to Japan because of prohibition, they brought their great recipes. And the product available there was Calvados. But before the war, there was no more stuff. And well, the cocktail era ended at that time. It started again after the war, but that was very poor cocktail, and nobody was drinking any longer cocktail. So it's really thanks to, I don't know whether we call them bartenders or mixologists, but in Ireland, in Britain, in Great Britain, some bartender started again with great recipes, and they were looking for high quality product, and they were interested into forgotten spirits, and Calvados was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So Calvados came back. Then from Great Britain, it moved to New York. From New York, it went everywhere. Now, if I travel and if I'm in Vietnam, if I'm in the Philippines, if I'm in Singapore, I find the same cocktails, and many are Calvados-based cocktails. So the conception has completely changed. Fruit Normand and Café Calva have almost disappeared, but now more and more consumers enjoy Calvados in cocktail.
I the best espresso martini that I had in 2024 was an espresso and Calvados martini. It was delicious. So I see the path forward there for sure. I'm curious, are there any specific
Yeah.
examples of, either great cocktails with Calvados that you've experienced in the world, or kind of other on-premise collaborations? So like food pairing experiences. Can you because I'm curious, I'm thinking about, those in Asian cultures where it's more traditional to pair spirits with food. How does Calvados work at a formal Chinese banquet? What is that like?
I have more experience in Japan than in China. I have some in China, but with Chinese food, it works well
Mm-hmm.
because Chinese food is very spicy, and you also have sweet and sour. That doesn't match wines. The wine is dead. It's good with beer. It's good with spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And problem is we don't have the resources to talk to the Chinese. There's so many. But if you do that in one restaurant in one city, people are quite excited. In Japan, Japan is a mature market for Calvados. So for instance, I've worked with chefs, and tempura food, for instance, matches well. Calvados matches well tempura food. We have
Hmm.
conducted many experiments, and one of the top restaurants in Tokyo is now offering Calvados with, with its dishes, with its dishes. So I think there is potential in Asia to for food pairing. Uh, in France, it would be in France and other wine culture countries that would be more difficult. Although normally we have some traditions. For instance, we have cheeses like Pont l'Évêque, Camembert, Livaro, which doesn't match wine. But cider and Calvados make perfect matches. So this is tradition. We also match with apple dessert. It was very well with tartatin or with chocolate too. Chocolate dessert, Calvados matches very well. Um, but of course, it's more difficult to convince French to try to match Calvados with other dishes. I've been asked by some top restaurants in Italy and in Switzerland and in Scandinavia to organize dinner, um, food, and different Calvados. And that was quite a success. But uh, one dinner, from that, it's quite difficult to convince many people to do that. So I think that will be easier in countries like Russia. It's easy because Russia they don't drink the Russians except from the south, but they don't drink wine with their food. They drink vodka. And if you bring, for instance, Blanche, which is an unaged Calvados, with food, they love that, and they say that's so much better than aromatized vodka, and that's easy. We uh, It doesn't take much time to convince, and and they go on. And this is one of the reasons maybe why Russia is a market for us. With Scandinavia also, they don't mind matching with Calvados, young Calvados. But in wine country culture, I think the way of eating and drinking is changing too. So we drink now, we don't traditional meals are very often replaced by something like an aperitif cocktail, and it's easier to match cocktail with a plate of cheeses or a plate of meat, and so we have more and more customers that are offering not neat Calvados, but a Calvados-based cocktail
Hmm.
with some food, not a formal dinner, but some food that you eat after the office and before going back home. And in the US, I think we see that. So I think those two cocktails and food pairing, they are they give better prospects
Hmm.
to Calvados. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think in the United States, I agree. I think it's much more common for you to see, like, you go to a restaurant and if somebody has ordered a drink and some food, it's much more common for that drink to either be wine or beer or a cocktail than a pour of straight spirit that they're going to consume with their
yeah,
food. And I think the other
yeah,
element for American consumers is that many of them don't know what Calvados is necessarily. But they
true.
do feel comfortable ordering cocktails with maybe one or two ingredients that they're not familiar with already because they're
Yeah.
confident that it'll be presented to them in a way that will be delicious or enjoyable or they'll learn something. So, I'm curious as you, because I know you've traveled in the United States also extensively for Calvados Drouin. Are you finding that, more American consumers now are familiar with Calvados, or is it still sort of an unfamiliar category for many Americans?
More and more consumers are familiar with Calvados. When I started every day, I was hearing, oh, what is Calvados? Only sommelier of top restaurants, and we are looking for top, and but not many people knew what Calvados was. Many have heard the name Calvados thanks to the novel of Eric Maria Remarque, The Arc of Triumph. Say, oh, Calvados, oh yes, there is a novel, but I have not tried it. So now I think more and more people know the product. Not that many, not everybody for sure, but most restaurants have Calvados on their list, and you have consumers everywhere, different parts of the United States. Some traditional market like New York, maybe you have more people that know Calvados, but California also now, as Calvados is quite successful in California too. Um, some states are not aware, that's true. And distribution is quite a problem in the United States. It's difficult to build a distribution because of the system. We far from the consumers, and now after merger, you have huge group, and they have no time to spend on a niche product, and so that the challenge for Calvados is to find distributors that are ready to explain what Calvados is, and organize education, and difficult to find the right partner today for niche products. Yeah, companies are so big.
Yeah.
Plus, you have 50 states. It's not one state.
It's complicated. Yeah. I I I wanted to switch gears a little bit because I went to a Calvados event I live in Portland, Oregon. I went to one last year, and that was being held by like the Calvados Bureau or some organization that was responsible for promoting Calvados, but not one particular brand. And so they talked a lot about the sustainability of Calvados and emphasizing that Calvados is really among the most kind of sustainable spirits because of how it's grown and produced. And so it was the first time that I had seen Calvados kind of marketed that way. And I'm curious about how you have seen that, is that a new kind of area of focus for Calvados to be talking about the sustainability components, carbon capture from these orchards, and is that tell me a little bit more about that. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, well, I was not aware of that because now the government asks every company uh, to to establish what carbon it produces and what carbon CO2 it produces. So we were obliged to do that, and we did it two years ago, if my memory is good. And we found that we had no idea of, and I take with me a few figures, but we just to not to say accurate things, we found that each bottle of our Calvados that we produce remove 2.9 kilogram of CO2. So we eliminate CO2. And of course, people might wonder why, how we do that. It's because we grow apple trees, big, tall apple trees, traditional apple trees. They are very rustic. We don't use any chemical for that. We protect our orchards with hedges. And we have grass eaten by cows. And that we have found that 1 hectare of traditional apple cider orchard consumes 5.3 tons of CO2. And if you compare to other spirits, because once we have reached that conclusion, we look what was the situation for others. And we found that for apple trees, it's similar to forest, more or less the same thing. Uh, if you look at the cereals, 1 hectare of cereals for making whiskey, for instance, consumes 2 tons instead of 5.3. 1 hectare of sugar cane, 1.8. 1 hectare of vineyards, more or less 1 ton. So maybe there are other products I don't know, but from this comparison, Calvados is by far the most sustainable spirit, and that's a worldwide problem. So consumers today pay a lot of more and more attention to this situation, and I think we're quite lucky. My father was very conservative. He was not interested into planting intensive orchards. I'm as conservative as my father was, and I've convinced my son, who is now as conservative as I am. So we all agree that we should go on with that. Of course, and the yield is not as good as in intensive orchards. We harvest less apples from 1 hectare, but at least we do not poison our customers using chemical products, and we help the problem of CO2 to remove CO2. So I think today more and more consumers are paying attention to that, and I think it's good for Calvados, not only our Calvados, but for the category. Yeah.
Hmm. And just to so that everyone is because I after reading your book, I feel like I know more about Calvados than I did before. But one thing that I learned was that not all Calvados producers are using standard size, what we would call standard size apples or full or tall apple trees, the
Yeah.
very large ones.
No.
There are many Calvados orchards that are also dwarf or columnar apples that are more
Yeah.
intensively grown. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's true. It's, well, the agriculture policy in Europe is very strange. Um, if I take the example of France, we were producing before the new, before the policy established in the 1960s, we had a lot of product that were considered of the top quality, and everybody was outside of France ready to pay a high price to have high quality cheeses, high quality, so many. And we started the appellation contrôlée system, which was, I think, a very good system. But in 1960, yeah, it created Europe, European Union, and agriculture policy was to produce as much as possible, intensive production, more and more milk. So to produce more and more milk, you give up the traditional Norman cows that give very high quality milk for cheeses, but do not produce much. So you have Holstein, black and white cows. They produce tons of milk, but of very low quality. And for everything, it's the same. For cereals, same thing. And for apples, the government encouraged by subsidies the replacement of traditional apple trees by intensive, because we already had too many apples at that time, which is not true any longer. But at that time, we had too many apples, and so they encourage plantation, give subsidies to get rid of the old trees and plant new apple trees, easy to harvest. But that was okay if you have a big farm, because you can industrialize the harvest too. But for small farmers, they realized that they have done that for nothing, and because it costs a lot to, they don't have the equipment, and so now the government is coming back regarding Calvados. They are encouraging again the plantation of big tall trees, but it takes 15 years before you get an harvest from a traditional apple trees, and close to 50 before we get a production of pear tree, of pears from trees. So it's a stupid a succession of stupid policies. But some producers, they are one of them, but there are others, resisted to that, and they say, okay, we don't take the subsidies, but we go on with our traditional trees. And my father has regularly planted the traditional apple trees, and I've done the same thing. Yeah.
And that's something that, do you feel that you notice a quality difference in the spirits that you make from those trees as well?
Yeah. The varieties of apple are the same. So whether you graft them but if you have big tall trees and if you harvest them like they should be when they are mature, it costs more because you have to go to twice, three times under the tree. If you harvest with a machine, you shake the trees, you harvest everything at the same time. And of
Mm.
course, some are well mature, others are not as well mature.
Mhm.
At the
Mhm.
end, the quality is not bad, but it's not really elegant. It's no finesse. It's okay for an average commercial product. But
Mhm.
if really you want to offer something exceptional, this is not the right way to harvest the fruit. And
I know we're running out of time here, but I also wanted to ask you, you have a new book out this fall with White Mule Press, The Art of Calvados, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that book.
well, I spent most of my life to try to promote Calvados, to educate consumers, to help Calvados to be better known. As you said at the beginning, not just my name, but the whole category. And when I started, I knew nothing. And I asked for books, and I was told, no, there is no books on Calvados. There are plenty of books on cider, but nothing on Calvados, and nothing on distillation of cider and things like that, except very, very technical books. Um, so I said, okay, journalists coming, people coming asking me for books. Sorry, there is no books. I looked for myself, but I wasn't able to find one. So I decided to publish the first one. There was definitely a need for books, and I published the first one in French in 1987. And it happened to be a success because many people wanted to learn a little bit about Calvados. And that was a book covering every aspect, production, consumption, history. And so um, I was hoping at the time to publish a book in English, but I found no publisher at all. So the funny thing is I had to wait 2020 to publish a book. I wrote it in English. It was translated into Japanese. So that was a book about Calvados, but I work with Japanese bartenders, with Japanese chef, and I found a publisher. And the book happened to be a success because it's been reprinted already twice since 2020. But of course, my objective was really to publish a book in English because with English, you talk to many people in the world. Now, again, even if I target the United States, Canada, England, Australia, but In many other countries, I was receiving email regularly. When do you publish a book in English? To publish a book in English, you need a publisher. Last year, I was lucky enough because a friend of us, a friend of mine, introduced me to Bill Owen in Paris. We had discussion. He was open-minded, and so open-minded that 1 year after, the book is published. And thanks to you, of course, we did a great job in helping me to put everything together and certainly to improve my English. Um, so I'm very happy to have that book finally published in English. I know that many of my friends were asking me when I will publish a book in English. We'll be happy to see that it's done. And okay, now we have to see how the distribute. But I think for American it shouldn't be a problem. For us in France, it's not so easy to order. They say yes, but they don't give any deadline, and so we will see. But I say I must thanks your publishing house, and I must thank the whole team because I'm very pleased with the work accomplished, and I'm very pleased to finally have a book on Calvados published by Calvados producer and available in the United States. Well, another book has been published before by Charles Niels. He made an incredible job, 700 or 800 pages book. My objective was more to give ideas of, well, of course, to explain how the product is made, give some history, but also show how the product can be enjoyed. And it's one of the most versatile spirit, I think, and primarily what I wanted to do with that book.
Yeah, I'm looking for one of the fun things about this book is that it has it has quite an extensive selection of cocktail recipes, but it also has some food recipes too featuring Calvados, which I'm working up my courage to make that souffle. Someday I'll make it. I've never made a souffle before, but I think this will be my opportunity.
I must say, at home we cook with Calvados.
I'm sure, yeah. Why not? Well, I wanted to leave, if anyone has any questions, this would be a great time to pop them in the chat because I think we're finishing up here. But is there anything else also that, um, is important to know about Calvados or your book or, as if folks have any questions as they type them in, any last thoughts?
Yeah, that's a question to me.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, if anybody is interested in discussing with me or a specific question to ask, I would be pleased to answer and to follow up. That can be done through networks or even for
Yeah, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Is it LinkedIn or is there another way?
my maybe not well the web and the internet address also, although I receive many many mails. But
Maybe LinkedIn.
no,
Wait,
LinkedIn is good.
I see a couple of raised hands. So John, I think I can allow you to talk. Let's see. I think yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
I can hear you.
Yeah, great.
Pardon me?
So I was I was wondering
Yes,
in
yeah.
producing Calvados, do you age your cider? And how many producers age their cider before they distill it, and how many distill it immediately after fermentation?
Well, we are today less than 300 producers, and that includes maybe 280 farmers that produce small quantities, and each one has his own way. Um, the tradition was not for quality, but the tradition was to distill in September, October for small farmers because they needed their barrel for empty for the new harvest. So we have no legal limits, but the aging accounts start on July the 1st. So most producers distill, try to finish their distillation for July the 1st. We harvest in fall, October, November, early December. We press them, the juices ferments during winter, and after that we distill. Um, the largest producers usually distill immediately. Um, and some farmers distill after 1 year of keeping, they keep their cider for 1 year. The problem is there are many risks if you keep the cider too long. It could become acidic, it could, so the administration recommend to distill before July the 1st. Um, if you have the best condition to keep the cider, um, it could be interesting to keep it for 1 year because you probably will develop complexity, but you're taking risk. Um, if you fermentation and if the juice is produced in October, fermentation is fast because it's still warm outside. If it's pressed in December, it's very slow. Can be 4 or 5 months sometimes. So there is no rule for everybody. Um, what we do, we keep our cider, we distill quickly cider for unaged Calvados because we retain more fruit flavor. And for Calvados, and we distill and we keep the distillation, last distillation for Calvados that we will age for a long time. We will get more complexity. So let's say that in January we will distill Calvados that we will bottle as blanche, for instance, unaged Calvados for cocktails, for where you want to deliver as much fruit aroma as possible. And those distill in May, June, even July, will be kept for Calvados that we age for a long time to deliver more complexity.
Hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
There are a few questions in the Q&A. I'll get through as many as we can. So a question from Travis is he asks, I'm wondering if you reference apple brandy and the American tradition when promoting Calvados here in the United States, and how much or how little do you differentiate those two products?
Well, I think the main thing is the apple varieties. Most producers in the United States uh, produce apple brandy from the same varieties of apple that we eat. Normally, we use hundreds of different apple varieties that we never eat. They are grown only to produce cider and Calvados. Many countries in the world produce cider, well, apple brandy, cider brandy, whatever you call them, with the same apple varieties that they eat. That give product. Some Americans have tried to bring varieties produced in Normandy. I don't know what the result will be because both have done that in the last 5-10 years. But the varieties is the key thing. Then you have the soil, of course, you have the climate, but I think the most important point is the apple varieties.
I see that. Well, oh, okay. So Yulia Norny, this is not a question, but she just said hello from Yulia. She just met you in China and that you were a great colleague. So Yulia says hello. And then I see David Klein has his hand raised and has for a while. I'm sorry. So, David, do you have a question as well?
I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to raise my hand. That was an
Oh, no
accident. Sorry
problem.
about that. My fault.
No problem. A question from Mike. What has been your biggest challenge in distilling Calvados that might surprise someone who is unfamiliar with cider?
My biggest challenge.
In distilling Calvados that might surprise someone who is unfamiliar with cider.
Oh, I'm not sure there is a specific challenge with distillation. If you have a good cider, distillation has to be well done. Of course, when we started, my father hired the distiller enjoying the best reputation in France, and now my son, who has done the right studies for that, is checking, conducting the key moments. You know, the key thing is when you cut the heads. The heads are components that contain very interesting aromas, but might be very dangerous for your health. So it's controlled, and there are two ways of doing that. One is automatic cut. You are safe, you can sleep well, but you lose some very interesting aromas. Then if you do that manually, if you have in regulation, but you retain more interesting aromas. And if you're objective, and so you need somebody with experience. So today, it's my son Guillaume who is, but the cider, of course, has to be of perfect quality. But distillation itself, I think this is really very, very good pot still in Pays d'Auge and patent still in Dauphintais.
Great. And there's one last question here, and I think we'll wrap up. Are there any specific fermentation, distillation, or blending practices that set Drouin Calvados apart from other makers? So things that you do that are different or distinctive.
Now we try to, okay, there is no secret in the production, you know. You have to do the right thing at each stage of the production process. Now, for the market and for our own enjoyment, we try to be very creative. So I started a long time ago to what we call today finish, you know, cask finish. I started that before everybody, up to a point that when the Scottish people started that, they came to me and visited me because I've conducted so many experiments. And we started to work with companies like Springbank, like Buckladic, like Isle of Arran, like Dalmore and others. Today, what my son is doing is exchanging bell with top companies in different areas, in whiskey, in rum, in cognac, and We ship them some barrel. They ship us the same number of barrel. We age our Calvados in their barrel, and they age their spirits in our own barrels. And we have enough experience. We have almost 40 years of experience in doing that, so we get very, very good results. And consumers are extremely interested into that. And I think this helps us to convince people which are naturally consumers of rum or whiskey uh, or cognac or any other product, like the cocktail. We introduce Calvados one way, and they discover, oh, that's finishing. Oh, that's interesting, and they
Yeah.
get interest into the category. Yeah, so it's marketing, but at the beginning it was not marketing at all. It's I was trying to build very complex bouquet by using different type of barrel, which was as far for port and sherry, a very, very long tradition in Normandy. But nobody was mentioning finish in sherry cask or in port cask or in Madeira cask. And
Great. Christian, thank you so much for being here. This was wonderful. We really appreciate it. Oh, and one more question. So how do we get in touch? So did you say LinkedIn is maybe the best way to get in contact with you, or email, or
yeah,
what's the best way?
oh, you can that both LinkedIn or email. If you could give my email to people who are interested. Yeah.
Yeah. I can, let's see. I think the chat is if you
C. Drouin,
we need
Drouin, no H. It's
I
not
was gonna say
Belgian
we need
way.
spelling help with the French stuff. So.
Yeah, at,
I think I can message everyone, so I will do that right now.
dot.
I can message
Okay,
everyone.
you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Hang on.
I will do my best to answer. Sorry?
No, I'm just getting this.
You,
There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. And if not, email me and I'll connect you. So
okay.
all right.
Good.
Well, thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for coming. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
You too.
Good night.